Hi everyone, welcome to Jonny and Trys Chats.
It's more about how you coach them, how you cue them, give the body what it's craving. New setup, new venue. Exercise selection shouldn't overly differ with rehab. I thought we'd talk about exercise selection for running, so like S&C work. I think your mobility work should be your S&C work. We'll talk about maybe exercise selection for the injured runner, how it differs, how maybe it doesn't differ at all. And then a little bit about programming.
Lovely.
Exercise selection for kind of training runners. To explain maybe a journey I've been on a little bit in my physio career, I think when I started physio, I had a fairly good working knowledge of training and exercise, and I'd probably say in the 2 degrees I've done, physio and sports rehab, actually, despite kind of common beliefs, I don't think gives you a great knowledge on exercise selection and cues within exercises and how to modify things. So really at the start it looked like really common exercises that you might see in a gym, people training. I'm happy to admit I've gone down rabbit holes left, right and centre, got into lots of different kind of thought process and philosophies, and my exercise selection probably looked a bit more out of place, I'd say, maybe in a gym, and was probably lacking at the time of awareness of the bigger picture. And sometimes you need these exercises that look a little bit more rehab to work out, fix kind of the missing piece of the puzzle, but then you build it into the bigger, more kind of complex movements. As I've gone through time, where I am now is, yes, I still use maybe a few exercises that look less common in a gym position, but I actually think it's how you can take exercises. A lot of the exercises we use now will look like they're very commonplace in the gym, but it's more about how you coach them, how you cue them, give the body what it's craving or what it's needing, and how you can cue different exercises depending on how a different person presents.
I think it's so fascinating how those degrees, they touch the surface of exercise prescription. It's a thin veneer, if any, and then that becomes the crux of rehab, physio intervention, and rather than the misconception of manual therapy, because people want to feel like they're getting benefit immediately, it's just not the case. It's a journey, and the journey begins with you taking ownership of your own rehab, right? And that, therefore, is exercise.
Absolutely. But I would say sometimes that generic rehab probably can't have those effects of kind of like manual therapy. Yeah. If you're really specific and you cue things well, I could probably get better instant results with an exercise than I could with manual therapy.
With the right exercise, and that's the key, isn't it?
And a slight tangent, just because we're talking about it, I had a client last week I saw for the first time, and he's not kind of qualified in any kind of movement or health, and he's gone down his own kind of personal experience of trying to learn these different thoughts and ways of thinking and ways of training and treating, and he was very educated on different kind of philosophies for someone who's unqualified. And at the end of the assessment and the treatment, he asked me, what's the best way to kind of get where you are now? Should I do a physio degree? Should I do personal training and such? And I had this really honest conversation with him that actually the degrees I've done, they give you a bit of paper that allows you to practice in certain areas, it gives you insurance, but really it scratches the surface. And if you were spent 3 years learning higher quality stuff, you would get a lot further.
I don't think that's unlike any other degree.
Yeah,
but it's just crazy to me that this is such an important aspect of
should be the middle, performance or
in
rehab.
General,
or
rehab.
Yeah.
And it's not. The military are kind of ahead of the game in a way that they were employing exercise therapists within their rehab programs, and that was pretty niche and ahead of the game, I think. Yeah. Although you did have a market for it.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we dive a little bit deeper into that, and we talk about how we would use an assessment, maybe a history. So if someone runs a lot, they lift a lot, how we can take knowledge from their kind of anatomy and the way they move, and we can cue things differently to maybe get the opposite of what they're getting a lot from their hobby, if that makes sense. So, for example, we know both runners and bodybuilders, I would say, both those kind of classifications of groups spend a lot of time in extended positions. It's the nature of running, it's the nature of lifting weights that you need to propel forward, you need to generate tension, and therefore if you do a lot of it, it generates what I would call like an extended body, or kind of a forward centre of mass body. And therefore you can use that knowledge. I mean, you can do that from the physio assessment. We can look at table tests, we can do lots of different assessments, but already if someone's coming to me and they've got that history, I'm like, it's very likely, unless there's lots of previous histories that's feeding into something, that they're going to have this presentation where they're extended and always kind of driving forward with their pelvis and their rib cage. And we can take that information and know they're in that extended presentation, and you can make slight modifications to really common exercises. But if you make the modifications the wrong way, you're going to drive them even further forward. And if you make them the right way, then you can bring them back and kind of bring them back to centre. You don't necessarily need to kind of come see me or anyone to get that kind of diagnosis. But if you know I run a lot, I lift weights a lot, yogis tend to be fairly extended as well, and none of these things tend to be asymmetrical. So it's not like you're a javelin thrower where you think, I might have side to side things going on. At least knowing that the activities you do likely puts you in a certain biased way of moving. And then knowing how to cue exercises, or cueing, or how you want to set up exercises to do the opposite, to bring you back to centre. I think that's really helpful. So if I give an example, so if we let's just take a split squat, okay? So if we have a split squat and both our feet are on the floor, and we just kind of think of that as normal, the normal position, and we think roughly our centre of mass is halfway house. If we raise the back leg, essentially what that's doing is it's pushing us forward. So we're going to come more onto our kind of midfoot and push our centre of mass more forward. And then the opposite is true, is if we keep the back leg on the floor and we raise the front leg, your centre of mass is going to come backwards. Similarly, if we did a squat, if we raise our heels, we put on a slam board, you're going to be able to get back into your heels and bring your centre of mass backwards. Very rare that you do this, but if you did the opposite and you kind of raise your toes, you're going to have to come right forward to get over that. And then also, if we use that example again, if you start thinking about things like shin angles, so we know that if you have a positive shin angle, so your shin is closer down towards your foot, so you're kind of into slight dorsiflexion, then our pelvis and our rib cage are going to be able to move backwards in space, where if you have kind of a neutral shin angle or behind, everything up top is going to be driving yourself forward.
You're talking about shin angle in standing or in an exercise?
So in a Bulgarian split squat, for example. Okay. Yeah.
Right, you're talking through the movement.
So you start with your knee over your toe, for example, and then we're going to get a lot more opening through kind of your hip, and hopefully your pelvis and your rib cage are going to come backwards a little bit, is another thing to think about. So kind of how you raise your feet, your shin angle that you're looking at, where the pressure is going through your foot. From neutral, you can very much so drive your centre of mass further forward, or you can bring it back, and therefore knowing how your exercise, your activities present. So for runners, for example, having a really forward centre of mass or being really extended, knowing you probably in the gym need to do a lot more things that open up the back of your hip, bring your pelvis and your rib cage back, are probably sensible things to be doing, and therefore modifications, just like we talked about, are probably more sensible.
I think that really nicely captures the exercise selection, or I guess to summarise, you can pick an exercise, something like a split squat, that to you is actually, it's really functional and to a lot of people is generic in terms of its application, but you can make it so much more specific to your needs just by small adaptation.
And I think that's why, I think I've said this before, if long-time listeners, I'll probably said this before, is you can't judge anybody in the gym without knowing their intent. So you will see hundreds of different, slightly different variations of split squats in the gym. None are right or wrong. Some people might not know why they're doing a certain variation compared to their body and their activities, but